It's several years now since we all learned what Jimmy Saville got up to, but one question never goes away. How on earth did he get away with it? Well, an inquiry into the BBC's handling of the case is soon to be published. It hasn't come out yet, but no one's letting that stop them talking about it because a draft has been leaked to the XRO website. Chris Cook has been looking at it.
Dame Janet Smith's report into Jimmy Saville's behaviour at the BBC notes more than 60 allegations. They include rape, assault and groping. Victims were both children and adults, male and female. Dame Janet says this leak is not of her final analysis and it has errors. Nevertheless, it helps us answer the question, how did he get away with it? In her draft report, Dame Janet makes clear that she thinks the BBC's culture in the 70s and 80s was a particular problem. This was an old-fashioned place. Executives used to have drinks cabinets in their offices that were refilled at licence fee payers' expense. This was a siloed place where people didn't share information from one programme to another. And it was a deferential, hierarchical corporation, a place where you didn't cause trouble for people who were more important than you. And Jimmy Saville, at the height of his powers, was one of the most important stars that the BBC had.
If you think it's right to make love before you get married, put your hands in the air.
Here's Jimmy Saville presenting the Speakeasy programme. After one recording in London in 1970, Saville tried to rape a BBC employee who had been in the audience. The 19-year-old told colleagues, and they advised her she would come out the worst if she complained. Dame Janet summarises, she feared a complaint might hurt her career. But Dame Janet notes that Saville had boasted darkly about sex and violence in interviews and books. It was enough that civil servants didn't want to give him an honour in the mid-1980s, but it wasn't taken seriously in the BBC. The producer of Jim Will Fix It is waiting for a final version of Dame Janet's findings before he comments on them. But he did have this to say today about his former colleague.
Jimmy Saville would tell stories about himself that were self-aggrandising, boastful. He was a braggart, and I had been in situations with him which I had later heard him recount to other people, and his later recounting was nothing like what had really happened. So that when he bragged to me about events that I hadn't witnessed, I didn't believe them either. Not that he ever bragged in any way about anything untoward sexually, but he would talk vaguely about conquests, and I would just think, oh yeah.
And it's #1 time.
Still, some of Saville's behaviour was in the open. Dame Janet says the lady in distress here on the left later complained about being groped on top of the pops, and her sexual assault wasn't taken seriously. The report finds no smoking gun showing that anyone senior knew enough, but it does query why some people who worked with him didn't work it out.
Jimmy Saville was really good at fooling people. He fooled a lot of people. He fooled the Vatican. He fooled the Honours Committee. He fooled Margaret Thatcher. He fooled the heir to the throne and his wife. And therefore, it's not surprising that he fooled a lot of BBC people, including me. And I think now, in retrospect, that he was probably getting a huge buzz out of the fact that he was doing these things and fooling everybody and achieving this great status at the same time.
Jimmy Saville was never formally investigated by the BBC, but Dame Janet noted that even if he had been, the BBC's probes in the 1970s into allegations of sexual abuse were feeble. Derek Chinnery's boss, Douglas Muggeridge, asked him to make some discreet inquiries. This interview was filmed before Mr Chinnery's death last year.
He'd heard rumours about what Saville had been up to, and would I have a word with him? It was typical old-fashioned BBC management sort of speak, and Jimmy said, oh, it's a load of nonsense. What do you do then? I ring Douglas Muggeridge and say, he says it's a load of nonsense. Where do we go from there?
We now know it was here on this street where Jimmy Saville had a flat 5 minutes walk from the BBC's headquarters that he committed some of his worst abuses. We also know a lot of people heard rumours that this was going on. It was bringing young girls back to his home. So why didn't they do anything about it? The truth is, a lot of people heard these stories about Jimmy Saville and didn't really believe them. They were part of the Jimmy myth. A lot of people thought he was actually asexual and just bragging to hide that fact. the more people heard these stories, the less they seemed to believe them. If Dame Janet's final version is close to her draft, she'll find that this is largely a story about people too worried to raise concerns, about naive colleagues who did not or would not see patterns and disregarded rumours, a management that simply didn't think enough of the young people to whom it owed a duty of care.
Chris Cook there. Well, we did ask to speak to someone from the BBC, but they declined. Now, it just so happens that this leak of a draft of the review into the Saville case has arrived just as a film called Spotlight opens here, which looks at a related issue. It's the story of the journalists on the Boston Globe who exposed the scandal